Long ago, in the village between the rivers, there lived a woman named Nandi. She was a woman of imposing presence, with eyes that seemed to see into the very souls of those around her. Her words were sharp, her demeanor cold, and her heart, once warm with the love of a mother, had turned to stone. Nandi's life revolved around her only son, Juma, a young man of great promise who was beloved by all who knew him. Juma was the pride of the village, a man of strength, wisdom, and kindness. His good nature and leadership made him a natural choice to inherit the mantle of his father, who had been a respected elder before passing on to join the ancestors. Nandi had raised Juma with care, molding him into the man she wanted him to be, and she had always imagined that he would remain devoted to her even after taking a wife. But when Juma announced his intention to marry Amina, the daughter of a neighboring chief, Nandi's heart was filled with a dark bitterness. Amina was a woman of exceptional beauty and grace, qualities that made her the envy of many. But it was her gentle spirit and kindness that truly captured Juma's heart. Their love was pure and strong, and their marriage was celebrated by all except for Nandi, who saw Amina as a threat to her control over her son. From the day Amina entered Nandi's home as a bride, the older woman treated her with barely concealed hostility. Amina, ever respectful, tried her best to please her mother-in-law, but nothing she did could soften Nandi's heart. The more Amina tried to show kindness, the more Nandi's resentment grew. Nandi felt as though Amina had stolen Juma from her, and in her twisted mind, she believed that only by ridding herself of Amina could she reclaim her son's devotion. The days turned to weeks, and Nandi's hatred festered like a wound that refused to heal. She could no longer stand the sight of Amina and Juma's happiness. Each laugh, each tender glance they shared, was like a dagger to her heart. Her thoughts grew darker by the day, and soon she was consumed by the idea of eliminating Amina once and for all. Nandi devised a plan of feast that would bring the entire village together, where she could discreetly poison Amina without arousing suspicion. She began preparations with great care, choosing only the finest ingredients to mask her true intentions. But among the delicacies she gathered, she also procured a deadly poison, a secret known only to a few. This poison, derived from the roots of a rare plant deep within the forest, was colorless, tasteless, and lethal within moments of consumption. The day of the feast arrived, and the village gathered in Nandi's compound, unaware of the darkness that lurked beneath the surface of the celebration. The air was thick with the aromas of roasted meats, spiced stews, and sweet fruits. Laughter and music filled the air, and the people, dressed in their finest, mingled and danced, their spirits high. Nandi moved among them with a smile that hid her true intentions, her eyes ever watchful for the moment when she would strike. As the sun began to set, casting a warm golden light over the village, Nandi called for everyone to be seated. The villagers gathered around the long tables, eagerly anticipating the feast. Nandi herself carried the special dish, a rich stew made from wild herbs and tender goat meat, to the head of the table where Juma and Amina sat. She placed a bowl before them with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "This is a special dish, prepared with love for my beloved children," Nandi said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "It is a recipe passed down from my ancestors, one that I hope will bring joy and blessings to you both." Amina, unaware of the danger, smiled warmly at her mother-in-law and thanked her. But before she could lift the spoon to her lips, Juma, ever the protective husband, reached out and took the first taste. "Let me taste it first, my love," he said, his eyes twinkling with affection. "I want to share in every blessing with you." Nandi's heart raced as she watched Juma lift the spoon to his mouth. This was not how it was supposed to happen. Panic gripped her, but she could not stop him without revealing her plot. She could only watch, horror-stricken, as her beloved son swallowed the poisoned stew. For a moment, nothing happened. The villagers continued to eat and drink, unaware of the tension building at the head of the table. But then Juma's face twisted in pain. He gasped, his hand flying to his throat as the poison took hold. The spoon fell from his hand, clattering to the ground as he doubled over in agony. Amina screamed, her heart shattering as she watched her husband collapse. The villagers rushed to Juma's side. Their joyous celebration turned to chaos and despair. Juma convulsed once, twice, and then he was still. The poison had done its work. And Juma, the pride of the village, lay dead in his wife's arms. The village was plunged into mourning, the joyous celebration replaced by grief and confusion. How could such a tragedy have befallen them? The elders gathered, their faces grim as they examined the remnants of the poisoned stew. It was clear that this was no accident but a deliberate act of malice. The villagers whispered among themselves, casting suspicious glances at Nandi, who stood frozen in shock, her mind unable to process what had just happened. But amidst the sorrow and confusion, something miraculous began to unfold. Amina, still cradling Juma's lifeless body, wept uncontrollably, her tears falling like rain onto his cold skin. She called out to the spirits, begging them to spare her husband and take her instead. Her voice, filled with despair and love, echoed through the night, reaching the ears of the ancestors who watched over the village. As her tears soaked into the earth, the ground beneath her began to tremble. The villagers gasped as they felt the earth move, a deep rumbling that seemed to come from the very heart of the land. The wind picked up, swirling around them with an eerie intensity, and the flames of the torches flickered and danced. The sky, which had been clear moments before, darkened as clouds gathered, obscuring the stars. Then, in the midst of the chaos, a light appeared, a soft, golden glow that seemed to emanate from the ground where Amina kneeled. The villagers watched in awe as the light grew brighter, enveloping Juma's body in its warm embrace. Amina's sobs quieted as she felt a presence around her, a comforting warmth that filled her with a sense of peace. The light intensified, becoming almost blinding in its brilliance. The villagers shielded their eyes, unable to look directly at the source. And then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the light began to fade, slowly diminishing until it was gone, leaving only the soft glow of the torches and the pale light of the moon. When the villagers dared to look again, they saw something that took their breath away. Juma, who had been lying cold and lifeless moments before, was stirring. His chest rose and fell with the steady rhythm of breath, and color had returned to his cheeks. Amina gasped in disbelief as she felt his heartbeat beneath her fingers, weak at first but growing stronger with each passing moment. The villagers fell to their knees in reverence, their eyes wide with awe and gratitude. The spirits had answered Amina's prayers and returned Juma to life. It was a miracle, a sign that the ancestors were watching, that they were merciful and just. Juma opened his eyes slowly, his gaze meeting Amina's. "Amina," he whispered, his voice weak but filled with love. I saw them, the ancestors. They told me it was not yet my time. They told me to return to you." Amina sobbed with joy, clutching Juma to her chest. The villagers erupted in cheers and praises, their sorrow transformed into jubilant celebration. The miracle of Juma's resurrection was a gift, a sign that the spirits had not forsaken them, even in their darkest hour. While the village rejoiced in the miracle, Nandi stood apart, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and disbelief. She had been so certain that her plan would succeed and that Amina would be the one to fall. But now her son lived. The sun set slowly over the village, casting long shadows that stretched across the land. The air, still heavy with the scent of incense and the remnants of the feast, was quiet, save for the distant sounds of night creatures stirring. The villagers had returned to their homes, their hearts still lifted by the miracle they had witnessed. Yet, within the village, there remained a sense of unfinished business, a lingering tension that would not be eased until justice had been served. In the center of the village, beneath the ancient baobab tree that had stood for generations as a silent witness to the lives and deeds of the people, the elders gathered. The night was deep, and the moon hung low in the sky, casting a pale light over the assembled figures. The elders, wise and solemn, sat in a circle, their expressions grave as they considered the events of the day. In the center of the circle, bound by ropes and guarded by two warriors, kneeled Nandi, her head bowed in shame. Nandi had confessed to her crime, her voice trembling as she admitted to poisoning the stew that had nearly claimed her son's life. The miracle of Juma's resurrection had left her shaken, but it was the realization of what she had done, of how her envy and hatred had led her to nearly destroy the very thing she loved most, that broke her spirit. She had begged for forgiveness, her tears falling to the earth like rain, but the elders knew that the ancestors demanded more than just words. The chief elder, a man whose wisdom was revered throughout the land, stood slowly, his aged body bent but still strong. He looked at Nandi with eyes that were both sorrowful and stern, for he had known her since she was a child, and he remembered the woman she had once been. But the laws of the village were clear, and the spirits had already delivered their judgment through the miracle they had bestowed upon Juma. "Nandi," the elder began, his voice deep and resonant, "you have committed a grave sin, not only against your daughter-in-law but against the entire village. Your actions were born of jealousy and hatred, emotions that have no place among us. You sought to take a life, but the spirits have shown mercy where you did not. They have returned your son to us, but they demand that justice be done." Nandi looked up, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She knew what was coming, and she had accepted her fate. The weight of her guilt pressed heavily on her, and she no longer had the strength to fight it. She only wished that she could turn back time to undo the wrongs she had committed, but she knew that such wishes were in vain. The elder continued, his voice unwavering, "You will be exiled from this village, Nandi. You will leave this place before the sun rises, and you will take nothing with you. The spirits have spared your life, but you are no longer welcome here. You will walk the earth alone, without the protection of your people, until the spirits deem you have paid for your sins." The words hung in the air like a final verdict, heavy and irreversible. Nandi bowed her head once more, accepting her punishment with the quiet dignity of a woman who knew she had brought it upon herself. The villagers who had gathered to witness the judgment remained silent, their faces a mix of sorrow and relief. They had loved Juma, and though they pitied Nandi, they knew that justice had to be served. As the night deepened, Nandi was led away from the village, her footsteps echoing in the stillness. The villagers watched her go, some with tears in their eyes, others with grim resolve. She walked without looking back, knowing that the life she had known was gone forever. The path ahead was dark and uncertain, but it was the path she had chosen through her actions. In the days that followed, the village began to heal. The miracle of Juma's resurrection became a symbol of hope and a reminder of the power of the spirits who watched over them. Amina and Juma continued their lives, their bond stronger than ever, and the village returned to its rhythms, the memory of the tragedy slowly fading into the past. Yet the tale of Nandi, the wicked mother-in-law, lived on. It was told to children as a cautionary story, a warning of the dangers of allowing darkness to take root in one's heart. And as the village moved forward, they carried with them the lesson that the ancestors had taught, that love and compassion are the greatest gifts, and that those who stray too far from these truths will face the judgment of the spirits, whether in this life or the next.